Let's start with Nigel Bradham. I didn't see it coming. What happened there?
Well, from what I understand, Nigel might not have read that Dale Carnegie book real well.
Which one? How to Win Friends and Influence People?
Yeah, because I don't think he did a really good job understanding that, one, this is not like any other training camp. In that, if you are a young player, a lot of those younger guys are getting a lot more reps in practice. And in that vein, I know what Nigel Bradham can do as a player. What I don't know is I don't know about Zach Bond. Chase Hansen, I don't know about him as a professional player. I want to see Caden Ellis more. I want to see Joe Bacci, the undrafted free agent. And he sort of bucked about it a little bit. And, you got to understand in that particular situation, they weren't giving you that spot. And you had to, and I think this is sort of Sean's way sometimes of dealing with veterans of, hey, listen, we got you, but go out there and earn it.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't quite understand that 2020 is different than other years in that they wanted to see the young linebackers. And he didn't handle it real well. Mm-hmm. And so I think Sean's deal was, you know what? Hey, thank you, and we'll move on. But I was like everyone else. You bring him in here. Here's a guy that has been a starter on a good defense in Philly, smart player, understood kind of where to put himself in the right place to make a tackle downfield. I thought he was good in the coverage part of the game, and he just didn't handle the early practice sessions well about it. And again, he kind of bucked about why. Okay, you got to understand when you get your shot, you go do it. But they want to see what the young guys can do. I know what a Demario Davis can do. I know what a Marshall Lattimore can do. But I want to see what the younger player can do. He didn't quite grasp it, and I think Sean said, you know what, I'm not going to put up with it, out. And he gave him an opportunity to go somewhere else fairly early in the process, too.
Yeah. It's amazing, Mike. Sean has rebuilt that culture. We've talked about it many times. So should we be optimistic about the young linebackers that maybe part of the reason they were willing to push Bradham out the doors because guys like Bond and Bacci that you mentioned are performing really well?
Yeah, and I think, Matt, too, that the world is starting to change in front of you. In the fact that I remember Coach O telling me this, that they're out of base formation with three linebackers almost 80% of the time. With the Saints, I think last year it ended up being in the 70s. So you're down to two linebackers.
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, now it becomes a numbers game with that part. And a lot of it having to do with the fact that you have a little bit of a hybrid player in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. You can sort of move around quite a bit. And I think you'll see the same thing occur with Malcolm Jenkins, where they'll move him around quite a bit. It's part of the new world, and I agree with you. Zach Bond is a guy that the coaching staff has really talked it up about. Now, playing in the forward position, you knew he could play. This guy's a really good athlete. You're talking about he was a former 100, 200-meter sprint champion in high school. The one thing I do know, man, you're pretty doggone fast if you're the 100, 200-meter sprint champ in a state, and you're a former wide receiver, quarterback, you play basketball. The big question with Zach is always going to be, if he's not rushing the passer in a third down situation, that's where I'm throwing the ball. It's nothing against him, but as a rookie, I'm going to test you in that field. He's smart. He understands this game at a certain level. This coaching staff has always liked Caden Ellis. He had a lot of different roles at Idaho, where one game you'd see him a lot in the coverage part, another game he was used a lot as a pass rusher. So he's sort of done it both. Again, he's got genetics. You know, his dad was a double-digit player in the National Football League in Luther Ellis with the Lions for over 10 years. He's very smart. He gets it. He got hurt last year, just wasn't able to perform it, but they liked what they saw of him in practice. Chase Hansen is another guy as the real interesting story in the fact that he is another former quarterback, got moved to safety, had quite a bit of injuries, seemingly always kind of nicked when he was in college. But when he played, man, he was a heat-seeking missile. He was a guy that could make plays really well, could drop back in coverage. Now, he had a lot of experience being a former safety. He understood the coverage part of the game. He flowed well east to west, just keeping him healthy, and then he had the back surgery. The Saints cut him and then brought him back. So you knew one thing, when they cut you and they bring you back and they know you can't play, ding, 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 hey, you must be a pretty good player.
Mm-hmm.
The question's going to be with Chase, can he stay healthy? Because when you watched him in college, he was a really good football player, very productive football player. But he seemingly always had some time off. And Joe Bacci also, man, you talk about a guy as a middle linebacker, smart, made all the calls for the Spartans defense, was a good player against the run, needed a little bit of work in the pass coverage part of the game. So I think they like the young guys. And two is you got to help out on special teams. And the one guy, they keep throwing him off the boat, and he keeps jumping right back in, Craig Robertson.
Yeah.
You know, every year it's the same thing with Craig. And they had a former Saints player that would always tell me, man, the coaches, man, they keep throwing me out of the boat. You know, they say, man, I can catch a bigger fish. I can catch a bigger fish. And I keep getting right back in.
Mike, didn't we have that same conversation? Wasn't it about Shanley all those years?
Yeah. Scott was like, you know, and everybody, they were looking to replace him.
Yeah.
You know, and he was beating them out.
Every year.
Every year.
Mm-hmm.
He was beating them out. And Greg Williams used to always tell me, he said, it's like going fishing, Mike. You catch that 3-pound bass and you say, you know what? I think I can catch me a 4 or 5. You toss him back out. You toss him back out of the boat. And he said, you know what? Sometimes, you know, the 3.5 pounder looks pretty good at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I understand that part with Craig, and the fact that he can play all three positions. And I think too, they know what Kiko Alonso can do when he's healthy,
mm-hmm.
and hopefully he comes back pretty quickly into the lineup, because he's also a guy that could play in the middle, could play on the strong side. He's got a lot of experience in this league, and so while, you know, you're disappointed that maybe didn't work out for Nigel, man, it's given a lot of reps to the young players to get in there and showcase their skills, and it's given Nigel an opportunity to sign with another team.
Mike D, let's talk some LSU. Of course, the big news this week is that all but 4 offensive linemen right now are quarantined. What's your reaction to that, and sort of how they make do this week and potentially part of next week as well without the bulk of their offensive line?
Man, listen, there ain't a lot of wiggle room with that.
Yeah.
I mean, we all knew somewhere along the line it would hit a group. That's going to be par for the course. If you're going to try to fight through this, and that's what everybody's trying to do here from an SEC standpoint, you're going to have those type things happen. Now, here's the thing. The worst thing to it is overreact. That, you know, come on, you went into this knowing that was a possibility that it could happen. The worst thing you can do for your team if you are part of the structure of this is to get excited about it. You got to just move on and get your practices in. And there's nothing you can do about it. Nothing. You know, you got to turn the page. I think this is why we got a lot of troubles in this world. We worry so much about what could have happened and not what's going to happen. And that, I think, is what Ed is going to try to do here. You can't worry about that's all you have, that you have 4 or 5 linemen. You got to just play through that and do the best you can and come out of it. This was something, I think, if I'd have told you this back in early July, there's going to be a group that's going to, one, maybe two catches it, and then you expose to it, and you might have them down for 7, 9, 14 days. I think we'd have just said, okay, that's probably going to be the case. The overreaction everywhere I get is, oh, my God, why didn't the coaches stop this? How are you going to stop it? Come on, be real about it. But we live in that world. We just do of overreacting to everything and not worrying about what you have to do at that moment. You can't change the past with it, so you just move on with it and try to do the best you can with the linemen that you've got and try to improve those individuals that you got. That's what practice is about, is getting better.
Mike, speaking of the linemen you got, Ed Orgeron did mention one thing that caught my ear, that they've got Marcus Dumerville and Xavier Hill, two true freshmen, backing up the right and left tackle spots. Should I be concerned about that? Because it feels dangerous.
Well, it feels as though that's the one area. And I actually I gave him this information, too, that and doing some research over the last 7 years, injuries in the Power 5 conference teams, which spots had the most injuries that players missed starts. Guards 1, tackles 2. Okay, and it was distinct. Offensive guards were 1. They just edged out offensive tackles. But the third spot was a little bit of a gap there between those two. High collision spots, areas that you try to build up depth. I always remember the phone call that we had days after he got the job and him saying, why Alabama is ahead of everybody else. It's not, and this was pre-Tua. It has nothing to do at quarterback. Our receivers can match those. Our running backs can match Alabama's running backs. Our defensive backs can match what Alabama has. They win in the trenches, and they have depth. Now, you've got some depth along the defensive line this year, more than any other time I can recall. It's not quite the case along the offensive line, and I think that's why you see so much effort in recruiting on getting offensive linemen. It does tell you a couple things. One, and I know he really always talked it up a little bit about Xavier Hill. Now, I always thought that his spot would be at guard, and then they've put him out now. He's playing left tackle, which that's impressive. He isn't this really tall guy. He's built sort of along the lines of an offensive guard. But, man, he's got good positioning skills. He knows how to jam those arms out and kind of keep you at bay. And Dumerville, has always played that tackle position. So what it tells you is that those two young guys coming in are better than the guys that he's got behind him. So you've got no choice, Matt, in that spot that they've got to play. Well, what it was year 1, the reality year 1 with Ed, didn't he start 2? Didn't Sadiq and Ingram start as true freshmen?
Oh, that's true. Yeah, Sadiq Charles started game 1 at right guard, I think, maybe, against BYU.
BYU, yeah. And then Ingram got involved, too, with it. So you had 2 starters that were freshmen. So that does tell you don't have a lot of depth at those positions. It does tell you those 2 young men are coming along pretty well at those particular spots. What also draws it up, the fact about Charles Turner. And we had this conversation a few months back. Either he plays center or he plays tackle. He's not built to play that guard position. When you look at the other offensive guards for LSU, Turner certainly would be the guy. You don't quite look to build. And now they've gotten him working that right tackle position, too. The one thing that stands out every time Ed has talked over and over and over and over and over again about a guy he really likes, Joseph Evans.
Yeah.
Listen to what he says about Evans and the fact that I think he wanted the experienced guy at center, and he got him, and hopefully Liam's the guy that can handle that. But every time he has talked, when they talk about offensive line play, he has brought up about, Joseph Evans, looks to be a really good player. And his comparison, he compares him a lot to Lloyd Cushenberry.
I like it.
Now, that's some big moccasins, Jack. That's all I'm going to tell you. Man, people in Denver are finding out, because I've done a couple shows there, Lloyd's running with the first unit as a rookie at center. Now, listen, that's an accomplishment, because one difference between Denver and New Orleans, Drew Lock ain't no experienced quarterback.
Yeah.
You know, he don't have all those starts under his belt like if the Saints would start Ruiz at center. Because at that point, what we saw even early on last year, Drew's making those calls for McCoy. He's helping out. Drew Lock, you know, it's just year 2 for him. But, man, Joseph Evans, to get that comparison, and you can say, man, that guy one day is going to be a really good player, and Coach has not bit his tongue about that, about Evans. To me, that gives me, you know, a little bit of hope there. And centers are becoming so difficult to find, too. We've talked to this about defensive ends, and they're becoming few and far between. The center position, look at LSU at one of the premier spots in the country. Are they loaded down with centers?
Well, considering
the answer is no.
No, you had to go grad transfer, and you mentioned Charles Turner. It'll be interesting to see, and they worked Chase and Hines. But that you're right, Mike. That felt almost like out of necessity. They had to work guys in there.
Yeah, and so it goes to show more and more. Steve Court and I have had this conversation, and he said, Mike, I never played center before in my life. He said, you know, I was a defensive lineman. I go to Arkansas playing defensive tackle. And, man, he said, I'm watching this guy ahead of me. And I said, man, that guy, I can't play defensive tackle if I got to play it like him. He didn't realize not everybody's Dan Hampton. you know, at the college level. And Steve was, the coach was, Steve, you're going to have to play on the offensive side. So he played guard. Bum drafts him and says, you know, the nose tackles are getting so big in this league. And they had an old veteran at that time, John Hill, who was a center. John, man, when he got on the scale, you knew the first number was 2, but the second number was probably going to be a 5. You know, John was like 258, 260, somewhere in that range. You know, and Steve was a bigger guy than that. And, you know, Bum moved in the center. And Steve was telling me the story, Mike, I never had problems with the deep snap. That wasn't the issue with me. You know what it was? It was the snap center, his hands under me. Because I wanted to get off the snap so quickly. I was pulling out, and all of a sudden they dropped the ball. And he said, you know, we had Snake at that time, Kenny Stabler. He said, you know, Kenny, you know, he was frustrated because Kenny was like most vets. I don't want to practice. I done did this all already. So he said one day just to kind of calm me down, because he said I was so upset about, you know, not making a handoff. He said, I mishandle one, and Snake takes the ball, and he throws it out of bounds. And he said, I know what's wrong with you. He said, man, he said, you know, I'm a left-handed guy, and that's a right-handed football. And he said, you know, he kind of broke me up with it. And he said, listen, he said, Jumbo, don't worry about it. I'm going to just ride you a little bit longer under center. And so Snake had to make the adjustment, you know, to just kind of, you know, not pull out quite as quickly from center. He said, Mike, I never had an issue with it. And he said, you know, playing with Bobby and Dave Wilson and those guys, we adjusted too. But it took a little bit of an adjustment for him, too, and to play in that. But he was like, man, today, there aren't a lot of guys that want to play center. You know, not a lot of big guys. Oh, that's my lifelong dream, to play center.
True.
How many people here say that? So now that's become, and also, you man, making all the calls, calming everybody down. You got to be the man. You got to be the leader. And finding that right guy. They thought they had it a couple years back with Cole Smith from Mississippi, and that didn't work out.
Yep.
And you know, I think he's at Mississippi State today. So it's the hardest position to play other than quarterback to come into play, because the responsibilities, and first things first, you better get that snap right. You know, and for most of the guys today, now they've got a lot of experience with the deep snap. Back then, deep snap, man, you got to explain me about that deep snap part. You know, we run in the wishbone or the option. And so it's different today, and they got a little bit more experience. But, man, it's the responsibilities. And I'm just telling you, Watch where LSU gets blitzed at early on this season. You've got some time now to think about it. It's not going to be off the edge because there aren't a lot of really good edge guys. It's right up the middle. They want to be in Miles's face. They want him to throw the bad pass, but they want him to throw it a little bit hurried. You can see it early on in this season. That's why they're going to try to go after him. You got an inexperienced guy who's played guard and tackle, but's never played center, and you got a guy that's his first time that he is the man at quarterback. So, your scheme's going to be the quickest way to get to him is a straight line. But those two freshman tackles, you better be ready to play them because the numbers tell you that other than guard, tackles have injuries more than any other position out on that football field.
Mike, Saints had some roster moves this week due to IR. They've also added cornerback Kemon Hall. Mike, honestly, I don't know much other than what I've read. What can you tell us about Hall and if he's a guy that maybe has a chance to make the team?
Tough, hard-nosed guy. I saw him play a lot at North Texas. He did a lot of bump and run coverage there. Playing off coverage is something he's going to have to pick up a little quicker at an NFL camp. But, man, he hangs in there. Man, he gives it everything he's got. He's going to give it to you. He's a JUCO guy that, man, he's never been given much. And so he's had to fight and scratch for it. And that he does really well. Man, he's a competitor. He really is. Now, again, the talent standpoint may catch him up. And I think somewhere down the line, this football team's going to add a veteran cornerback. Now, it may be a little bit closer toward the end in training camp, but I think that's an area where they would like to get another outside cover cornerback. They got Keith Washington, who they really like. He's built for the position. He's a long, lean athlete, a former quarterback in high school, signed with Michigan. Didn't work out well there in transition. Then he went to West Virginia. Man, you think about every day in practice. West Virginia, I know they're running a few running plays.
Yeah.
But man, they're throwing the football.
Yep.
That's bottom line. And they like him a lot. But I just think Sean would like to get a veteran there. Kemon's got a shot now. He's got to make his impact on special teams. I think we're coming down to that point where you sort of know now who can play, who can't. Now it's finding me the best special teams guys that work as a group. And I remember Greg McMahon when he was with the Saints, and we've had Bobby April on so many times to talk about special teams play and how it's just finding those right guys to work as a group. And, many of them haven't played that position. Even at the professional level, they were really good college players, but they weren't asked to play special teams. And then now they get put in that position where the only way you can make it is make that impact on special teams. And you're seeing Marquez Callaway, Jawan Johnson. These aren't guys that wasn't their forte, in college. Hey, I want to play outside. I want to be the gunner on special teams. And so they're having to learn that, and that is going to be a big part of how the end of that roster gets shaped. We've seen it before. A few years back when J.T. Gray made this team, nobody was picking J.T. Gray to make it. He made it on special teams. A couple years before that, Josh Hill, he made it initially off of his special teams play. And I do think that's going to be a big part as it gets toward the end, because I would think now, man, listen, just kind of throwing on like a 53-man roster, you probably know who 50 of the guys are. The big battle is for the final three.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to try to keep depth at a certain position. And so that always comes in play with it. And, man, the linebacking core, cornerbacks, wide receivers, where you got some numbers, that's where it's going to be a tough cut.
Mike, you got to go out to practice this week. Any other observations that strike you?
Deontay Harris, and more, and leading up to it, you could see it, that Harris was a guy that Sean talked so much about in the offseason. every time you get him on.
Yeah.
You know, he would bring up Deontay as a guy. We got to find a way to have him touch the ball more. And I remember before they played Seattle and after they played Seattle last year, him bringing up Harrison about, you know, I had a conversation with Pete Carroll. You know, he said, you know, I talked to Pete Carroll about it, and he didn't name, but he didn't have to. In essence, Tyler Lockett's the guy because they have a similar build. Tyler's a little bit taller, but he ain't that much taller than what Deontay is. And he made his mark pretty early on special teams, but he also did a lot of receiver play. And I think that's where they got the blueprint that maybe, man, we can get this, that he can be – now, I don't know if he can be as good as Lockett. Lockett's a really good receiver. But I think that's what they would like. And you can see Lockett has really caught on. You know, the sad thing is that he missed not having those OTAs and all that other stuff where he could have really worked in unison with the quarterbacks, and in particular with Drew Brees. But, man, he's got a skill set that with that type speed and make you miss skills, they want him on the field as much as possible because of what he can do. And you also got to understand because of his build, it's almost like a pitcher with a pitch count that, you know, you don't want to, because of what he can do on special teams. And Ty Montgomery, because he's a bit of a specialty player, and I think the NFL is turning into that. It's a specialty league. And here's a guy who has started at halfback and wide receiver and also done some return work. And Sean's sort of moving the football chess pieces around, finding the right spot for Ty. And if something happens injury-wise to Alvin Kamara, then you don't have to change your offense up much. Latavius Murray's a different style player than what Alvin Kamara is. With Ty, there is some similarities there, and his ability to catch the ball coming out of the backfield, you see it. And, man, I'll tell you what, the coaches who they've raved about, too, is the development of Adam Troutman at tight end, that somewhere down the line, I don't know how early it'll be, but somewhere down the line, you're going to see them use him a lot. He's a really good inline blocker. He's physical. He can split the middle of the field and get downfield. He's a big target in the red zone, which is huge because once you condense the field, man, it's really tough. And Sean's always about putting sevens on the board instead of threes. I remember the first year with Jimmy Graham, and Jimmy, you know, was this, man, really good-looking athlete. You saw him in training camp. But it took him a little while to kind of grasp everything from the professional level. And I get that because he didn't have a lot of experience. Troutman's had me, but he's played at Dayton. That's a little bit of a difference.
Right.
By the end of the year, Jimmy was fully enhanced in the offense. And I think with Jared Cook and with Troutman, especially in short yardage, red zone areas, you're going to find a way to get him on the field. And I feel the same way about Zach Bond. Even if you play two linebackers, and if they're healthy, it would be Demario Davis and Alex Anzalone. We did so many camps with Ryan Nielsen in the offseason other than this year, and Ryan would always talk about finding a spot, finding a way to get a guy involved that he can make a difference. And I see that in Zach Bond, that there's going to be packages built to use his pass rush skills as a player. Because, man, he can do that really well. He knows how to kind of put his hand on you and get around you, move around you. Use his speed, a move, kind of counter move, and to get into the backfield. And Carl Granderson is another player, because you're always trying to build up depth, and I think the Saints certainly have it at defensive tackle. Defensive end, we saw it last year with Granderson that he flashed it. And the fact that the Saints kept him and put him on the 53-man squad goes to show just what they thought of him after he had some issues off the field. And I never forget, this was about 10, maybe 11 years ago. I had the Louisiana line camp with Pete Jenkins, and Pete was telling me, you know, all these guys, all these defensive ends, because Pete was working, man, all over the place. And he was talking about how these guys want to look like Charles Atlas. And he said, Mike, I got nothing against it. And, You know, you got these 6'4", 250-pound guys, and they all buffed up from the waist up. And he said, I tell him, man, that looks great for the ladies if you out. But he said, you know, if you want to make your career in the NFL, you know what you got to do? You got to get stronger from the waist down. It's all about creating that power in your legs that fuels the fire. And he says, I'm just telling you. And it's funny, when Hunter came out for the draft, and I talked to Pete about Danielle Hunter, because he was so close on a lot of plays, but I think he ended up with like 6.5 sacks at LSU throughout his entire career. He was close, but he was never there. But, you know, he didn't make the sack, but he was close. And he came for one of the camps one year, and one of the things he brought up to me, man, I'm working on my lower body power. Because he said, I see the difference today. I was at LSU, 235, 240. I was working on trying to physically get stronger from the waist up. And he said, when I get in the NFL, man, these big 300-pound guys, he said, it's like trying to get around an 18-wheeler. He said, you know, it takes a little while to get around it. So he said, to build up that power, man, I've really been working on my lower body power. And he told me, I talked to Pete, and he gave me kind of instruction. Listen, you got to get stronger there. Look at Hunter the last 3 years of what he's been able to do.
Yeah.
You know, and I do think that that's a big part of this game with Granderson, that he would have probably been a top 110 pick had he not had the issues off the field. And now you got him as an undrafted free agent. He comes in, I mean, you know about thin, he's thin. Because that second number definitely was a 5. I know the first one was a 2. The second number was a 5. Not sure if it had been 251 or 259, but it was a 5. And now he's up to the high 270s, around 280. Now, I don't know if he can keep that during the season, but the fact that he has gotten bigger tells you that he understood what he needed to do, and that was to get stronger from the waist down. That's where you build up, man, that fire to get off that snap and then turn the corner. And so I like seeing that. That I'm just telling you, and that's something to watch at LSU as they get all these young defensive linemen. And Ed's talked about Ojolari and Webb and Ali Gay, and how, you know, they're built is, you know, they're kind of tall, lean guys, building that lower body power. That's going to be the key for them, because that's where, man, if you've got athleticism and you go quick, and then all of a sudden you get that lower body strength, and then you're going to be difficult to stop. So I think Granderson's been a guy, and I know from just talking to a few of the coaches, they have brought up the fact that he gets it. He understood it. And if you watch the development of young defensive linemen that come into this league, and 5 years later they look the same, they haven't gotten it. You know, they don't understand that power is from the waist down. It's not, you know, looking like, you know, you want to go to Muscle Beach.
I can't believe I didn't ask this one earlier. If LSU doesn't get a transfer cornerback, they're looking at lack of experienced linebackers. Could they possibly play more on big nickel with Stevens, Hampton, Harris? Let me ask you about corner. Do you think they get a transfer corner?
Yep.
Okay. Kevin says, ask Mike, what's the main reason Akeem Hicks wasn't successful for the Saints?
They didn't have a vision for what he was used at. You talk to the players that went against him in practice every day. They all said, that guy is unbelievable. But the coaching staff didn't have the vision for him. And Sean has admitted, we screwed up. We screwed up with Akeem Hicks.
Yeah.
And, man, that was a big screw up. But the one thing it taught you learn a lesson. You get rid of one, they didn't do it with Onyemata.
Well said.
Because they know what they have in him.
Ask Mike. This is Matt. Ask Mike, evaluation of Arik Gilbert and Cole Taylor, the freshman tight ends.
Arik Gilbert is the unicorn.
Yeah, right.
I wrote this a couple of weeks back. I wrote it again on social media. I've seen nothing like him at LSU. Nothing. That tight end like him. And he's going to make a quick impact. Cole Taylor's a really good player. A tall, lean guy who can get up the field. And he's deceptively fast because he's so long-legged. Man, I'm just telling you, I'm interested to see, because I think Sunday, there's a young man, I think he's Jalen Sheed from Mississippi, that's going to commit. And LSU's in the mix for him. He's one of the best tight ends in the country today. LSU would have never been in the mix for that guy in the past. Gilbert special.
He's Mike Detillier. Last one, raw or char-grilled oysters?
Or char-grilled for me. Now, I'll eat them raw. I'll eat them raw, but I prefer it.
Mike, we got to go. We'll see you next week.
All right, brother. Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.